Hi, I'm Sahana,
I'm Meghana, and
and
this
this
is
is
Shankari,
Shankari,
our
our
co-host
co-host
and
and
co-producer.
co-producer.
Today we're going to be discussing the story A Wagner Matinee by Willa Cather. I'm just going to give a quick plot summary of the story before we dive into it. Basically, the story revolves around a guy who's living in Boston who basically invites his aunt over from her homestead in Nebraska to settle in a state. He's very excited to see his aunt, and he's thinking of all the things they could do together because he loves her very much and he treats her very reverentially. Even though she had a lot of work on the farm when he was there, including taking care of the children, taking care of the animals, making meals, and such. She always like spent time, like even to the hours of midnight, to have him read Latin to her and make sure that she verified all of his pronunciation and to teach him music. On this path of music, his aunt used to be a teacher and a musician at the Boston Conservatory, but she ended up eloping with a guy who was 9 years younger than her before and moving to a homestead in Nebraska, where she's continuing to live her life. When she comes over, she's barely the person that he knows from before. He can kind of see that she's like kind of like tired out and worn and almost like a husk of a person that she used to be. And he's worried because she barely responds to anything that he proposes, and he worries that they won't be able to do the activities that he's planned out, which includes going to see the Wagner Matinee or a Wagner Matinee, which is just like a huge like musical performance. And he's worried that she won't be able to appreciate it because all she can seem to think about is like the homestead and worrying about the stuff that she's left behind in Nebraska. But when they end up going to the musical performance, his aunt is so moved emotionally by it, and she's just cries continuously throughout the performance, and she's like drumming her fingers on her clothes trying to follow the rhythms of the performance, and she's so moved by it, and she doesn't want to go back home at the end of it. So that's basically the general summary of A Wagner Matinee. So Sana, do you want to take away our first discussion?
Yeah, so one of the points that we wanted to bring up was how um like the music kind of leads to a sort of like revival of herself in some
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? Because he describes her like revival through the music as being something like her soul is like one of those plants or mosses that when like can rot away on a shelf for 100 years, but when you put it back in water, it comes to life again. And that's what he describes her as, because he thought her soul was dead. He thought she wouldn't be able to appreciate music anymore, and to be frank, he was kind of embarrassed by bringing her there. He was kind of embarrassed by his thinking that, oh, she would actually understand this. But seeing her comprehension of it really moves him and moves her as well, because she can breathe again for one moment, even.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I want to touch on Sana's point of like she can breathe again for one moment. When she actually gets to the uh, like Boston where the narrator is at, it's kind of like she's almost like the way the author describes her makes her sound like a corn husk. Like the author describes her as like very like tanned out and kind of wrinkly and old. And there's a point about her shoulders, right? What
Mm-hmm.
was that?
Her shoulders were like so slouched that they almost seemed like they were coming together.
Yeah, exactly. Like she is just so like worn down by her years on the farm, which is 30 years by the way, 30 years on the farm just working, right? And so she's so worn down by that. And it's kind of like this when she as soon as she goes into and then like her clothing too, like when she gets there, she's like covered in like black soot. Like she's just covered in dust and soot, and then she's wearing like clothes that like what the narrator describes like really mark her out as like this country woman. Like they're very country-esque clothes, right? And then so he's like worried like how will she assimilate to like the stuff here, like how will she fit in. And when they go to the actual music conservatory, all the women there are like there's mostly women there, and they're all dressed up in like all of these like vibrant shades of color, and they kind of look like, as the narrator and the aunt described, dabs on a painting. And his aunt like kind of sticks out in this like a sore thumb in like her black country dress. And so he's just very worried, like Sahana says, he's kind of like embarrassed at having her brought here because he's worried that she won't even be able to grasp the level of music because she's like it seems that she's left all of that behind her. But again, when the music starts playing, she is so emotionally moved by it. She starts drumming her fingers in the folds of her skirt, trying to follow the patterns of the rhythms of the music, trying to mimic the piano player's fingers with her own. She is just like captivated by like what's going on in front of her, and she's so moved by it. She's like, finally, there's this life, there's this color, there, and like you'd be thinking like she's surrounded by this animal life all day, but and when she experiences it, and it's like no, it's like this passion reawakens inside of her, and she's able to see that through the musical performance.
Mm-hmm. So that is the kind of like spirit of the story. And in addition to that, you can kind of sense like a melancholy feeling at the end of the story
Mm-hmm.
because she's really protesting that she doesn't want to leave this concert hall, and he realizes it's because outside of this concert hall, for her life when it's no longer music, it's just the farmstead, the homestead, and it's the farm, and it's like that dry, drudging, like horrible life that she had to live before, and that's why she doesn't want to leave so badly. So there is melancholy in it. It's like this is just like a peak. Like her soul has just been awakened for a brief moment before it has to go dormant once again.
Exactly. And speaking of that dormancy, she it's kind of like she has this like repressed desire in her to like hear music and learn about it. Where like, she kind of, her, though she teaches the narrator music when he's younger, he's like studying her old notes and her old scores, but she never like gets into it with him, because for her getting into it would mean like opening up that box of desire and kind of like falling into a spiral of, this is so beautiful, but I can never truly have it because I
Yeah.
have to focus on my life here.
Another important point that might be relevant to that is the fact that she's really religious.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's another
Oh
thing.
yeah.
She's like, oh, like if I cling on to something too much, like what if that's the thing I have to sacrifice? So she warns him like, don't love music so much, otherwise you'll have to sacrifice it.
Yeah, and then there was a point with like a little, like the song and a little German guy who came
Mm-hmm.
over.
Yeah. So like at some point when she was on her homestead, this one of a German worker came to um like work there at the farm and like make money or whatever. And he knew how to sing like one song, and she was like obsessed with it. She kept telling him to sing over and over and over again because like it reminded her, it was a glimpse of her past life. And he ended up leaving kind of unremarkably. He kind of just stumbled out of the town drunk, but like those moments for her were like moments of salvation. They were like little drops of water on the dry husk of her soul.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that point of like the way he went out was like so like small and like undramatic. He was kind of just like, he like drank a little too much, ended up breaking something, and then he it was like he just left the next day. It's like said in like a run-on sentence too,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of like the author doesn't put any emphasis on it. But for his aunt, that moment that he came in and sang those songs was like a huge reconnection to who she truly was, like who her identity was.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the thing that makes this story so heartbreaking is that I think the narrator kind of realizes at the end, like you may think that he even like regrets having taken her to like this performance, because it's like, why would you give her something just to take it away in the next
Mm-hmm.
moment? It's like she gets this glimpse of beauty that she could have had she not married
Yeah.
and like moved.
Yeah.
She gets this glimpse of beauty, but she's unable, like she knows that she will be unable to reclaim it unless she makes a huge drastic change to her
Which
life,
isn't going to happen.
which isn't going to happen, which is
Yeah.
improbable.
Mm-hmm. So that's the story. A Wagner's Matinee is definitely one of the more sadder stories I've read, but there is so much meaning in it. The language is a little old, but at the same time, it's still very informative, and it's still it's really fun to read. It's like you are in the moment. The imagery is brilliant. So I would highly, highly recommend reading this story. You can just access it anywhere. It's freely posted and available online. So I'd highly recommend reading it. And thank you so much for watching.
Yep, thank you for watching. The story is definitely worth the read. Like Sahana pointed out, the imagery is beautiful in the story, with the imagery of the ant being like kind of like a hollowed husk or a shell of who she was in the past, to the transition of the vibrant music that kind of invigorates her and kind of breathes a wisp of life into her again. It's a truly beautiful story, and I would highly recommend you all read it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.